This is your last chance. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Hi there. This episode it's about dual booting Windows 11 and Windows 98 Second Edition. Back when I started to make this video, I was cold, so I had this idea to use an AI voice generator instead of my rusty voice. That's why in the rest of the video you will hear from Ethan from the Morph AI voice generator software. Now let's get down to business.
First, we have to create a DOS USB bootable stick. Allbootdisks.com is just the right place to start this job. In this video we are going to use Windows 98 Second Edition boot floppy. Once we have the files, we need a program that will make our stick bootable using the file we just downloaded. Unitbutton is maybe the perfect tool for this job. You'll see why immediately. To make our USB stick bootable, just select the floppy image and let Unitbutton to finish the job in no time. Now let's copy the Windows 98 installation files on the same USB stick. We don't need the whole CD, but only the files inside Win98 folder. As a courtesy of Unitbutton, after we use the bootable USB stick, these installation files can be accessed using drive letter B. Oh! And before everything else, let's make sure that CSM, which stands for Compatibility Support Module, is enabled in BIOS. Now let's bring up the boot menu and select our USB stick as boot drive. If we type C, and we get invalid drive specification message, that means we don't have any FAT or FAT32 partitions on our drive. By simply typing fdisk we can delete and create partitions. To delete any non-DOS partitions, like a regular NTFS partition made by Windows 10, we can use fdisk, a standard tool of any MS-DOS boot disk. Using fdisk it's not the fastest way. We can achieve the same results by using disk management tool included in Windows. Anyways, for this time we gonna use fdisk with its non-graphical interface. Now let's create a primary DOS partition, not bigger than 32 GB. Let's say 29,999 megabytes. Once it's created, this partition must be set as active, using menu entry number 2. Fdisk will display a warning if we forget to make it active. If we use a bigger drive, fdisk will get confused about the drive's total capacity. Don't worry, we can still create a perfect valid partition at the beginning of the drive. In our case, the remaining capacity will be handled by Windows 11. Since we changed our drive configuration, we have to restart to make further changes. After restart, we can access the C drive, but, at this point, we have just a raw partition with no file system on it. It's time to use the Format tool. We go to drive A and we simply type format C:& Y to confirm that we agree to format the drive. We go back to drive A, and we type SYSC:. In an instant, the command.com file and a couple of hidden system files are transferred to the root of C drive. Also the boot sector is modified and we get a system transferred message. This means that, from now on, our C drive is able to boot on its own. Next, we use the copy command to transfer hymem.sys and the text editor, edit.com, from a drive to C drive. All we need now is to transfer the Windows 98 installation files from USB stick to C drive. We go to C drive and create an empty directory. Let's name it CD. Now, let's go to B drive, where earlier we created a Win98 folder. Remember, this B drive is a courtesy of Unitbutton. We enter the Win98 folder and type copy C:/CD to copy all the files. So far, we have a bootable DOS drive with Windows 98 installation files on it. Now we can start the installation directly from our hard drive or SSD. This is the most compatible method, especially when using on modern hardware. Now we go to our CD folder with Windows 98 installation files. And we type setup. If everything is okay, the installation will start. If not, we should get an error message. Basically, Windows Setup is trying to figure out what type of PC we have, but sometimes fails, especially when we use unsupported hardware. This is the reason why, earlier, we have copied the hymem.sys file to our hard drive. We have to manually install the memory manager, hymem.sys, and specify what type of PC we have, and then setup will start normally. So let's do this by creating a text file and name it config.sys. This file must be placed in the root of C. For this job we have copied the text editor edit.com. Now we have to restart our computer. No more bootable USB stick. This time the hard drive will act as a boot device. Since we have a config.sys file in the root of C drive, this special configuration file will be processed and consequently the hymem.sys memory manager will be in charge with the extended memory, which is much needed by the Windows setup. Now Windows 98 setup should start, and it does. Well, let's make a plot twist and postpone Windows 98 installation. It was important to partition the drive the way we did it, before installing Windows 11. So we are going to install Windows 11 on the remaining space, and after we are done, we will create a boot menu entry for our DOS partition and we will resume the Windows 98 installation job. Well, officially, Windows 11 can be installed only in UEFI mode, and not in the CSM mode which we enabled for our legacy DOS setup. Actually, this is only a PR stunt, because technically, just like Windows 10, Windows 11 can run perfectly on a PC without UEFI or TPM module, and can get along even with a late Pentium 4 CPU. To bypass all this official minimum requirements we need to cook a special USB stick. We are still using the official .iso downloaded from the Microsoft site. This time we need Rufus, but not the latest edition, Rufus 3.17 version or older, will do the job. Please take a look at this exact settings we need to use with Rufus to create this special Windows 11 installation stick. Now that we have a special bootable USB stick, let's use it to install Windows 11 on the remaining unpartitioned drive space. The installation, it's the same business as usual, nothing special. Obviously, this particular installation has to deal with a FAT32 partition created for DOS and Windows 98. Windows 11 has no problems with a such scenario since NTFS and FAT32 partitions can simply get along on the same drive. Anyways, Windows 11 installation will change the boot entries in order to take over at the next restart. After all, it makes no sense to make a fresh Windows 11 install and let the old operating system still in charge. At this point our DOS partition is not bootable anymore. We are running now on a fresh Windows installation and there is only a C drive with Windows 11 on it. How about our DOS partition? Where is it? Well, the partition is safe, we just need to add a drive letter using the disk management tool. This is an optional step from a dual boot perspective, but of course is quite handy to copy files directly from Windows 11 to Windows 98 drive. The other way around is possible only using third-party tools since Windows 98 does not understand NTFS file system. Now let's do some dual boot stuff. The Windows 11 boot manager hasn't changed much since Windows Vista, and technically is still able to boot directly to DOS. By manually editing Windows boot configuration data file we can add a DOS boot option, but this is not an easy job since we need to extract the boot sector, save it in a file, identify our partitions IDs, and in the end, we have to type some long command lines. It's much easier to use a third-party tool like EasyBCD which makes this task trivial. So, how simple is it? First, we select Edit Boot menu, then we add the MS-DOS 6 option as a boot entry, and that's it. EasyBCD can automatically determine to what drive and partition the settings will be applied. This is possible because EasyBCD will look for io.sys, a system file that must be in the root of any bootable MS-DOS partition. Let's not forget to save settings and at the next restart we will be greeted with a boot menu. I prefer the text-based interface because it's faster. You also can use the Metro graphical interface. Oh, let's rename our boot menu entry to Windows 98 2nd Edition because this is what we want to install. Now let's do a restart and check it out. Well, it simply works. To get this job done, EasyBCD is using Grub for DOS bootloader which will take over for a millisecond just to give full control to MS-DOS 6.22. So let's navigate to the Windows 98 installation folder that we have created earlier and type setup /? inside that folder. This /? switch will bring up a list of setup switches, but this is not the whole story. There is an unlisted IR switch, which will prevent Windows setup to update the MBR, which stands for Master Boot Record. Basically, we want to keep the boot settings the way they are, and not lose the functionality of our dual boot menu. We can use also/is switch to skip the scan disk check. Once started, the setup promptly detects our Windows 11 NTFS partition and is informing us that NTFS partitions can't be accessed in Windows 98. This message doesn't affect the installation in any way. Actually, the first part of the setup usually works flawlessly as if we are using 1998 hardware. It doesn't matter how much RAM we have, what CPU or disk hardware we use, the setup will do its thing until the first restart. On computers with more than 512 megabytes of RAM, the second part of the Windows setup will start with the following message: insufficient memory to initialize Windows. This happens because a special memory area reserved for mapping the available physical memory runs out of its own space the more RAM has to take into account. Fortunately, there is an easy fix for this issue because we can limit the physical amount of RAM that can be mapped and used by Windows itself. Now we have to restart. Because Windows did not load properly last time, we are automatically greeted with a startup menu. We select Command Prompt Only so we can apply the Too Much RAM memory fix. This fix requires to edit the system.ini file, which can be found in every Windows installation folder. To make the necessary edits, we can use edit.com text editor, which was copied earlier from the bootable floppy to the root of C drive. Inside system.ini we scroll to 386 ENH section and we add this entry: max physpage equals 20,000. This setting alone will limit the physical memory to 512 megabytes. Windows will simply ignore anything above this value. Also, we need to add another entry regarding the file cache under the cache section. Here we type max file cache equals 262,144, which corresponds to 256 megabytes allocated. To resume Windows 98 setup we type win at the DOS prompt, or we can restart as well. At this point, if we are greeted with an user license agreement, this is very good news. At least, we know for sure that Windows 98 is okay with our disk configuration, otherwise, this is the exact moment when things can go wrong. Well, let's assume that our configuration is Windows 98 friendly, and everything is going smooth. On new hardware, it takes about 2 to 3 minutes to check the plug-and-play devices and get it done with the finishing touches. Now we have to install drivers as usually and we are done. But there is a twist. If no unknown device is showing up in Device Manager, then we won't be able to install any driver. This happens because the PCI bus wasn't installed during the setup. No problem. We can install the PCI bus manually and we'll end up with a bunch of unknown devices. Don't forget that PCI Express is just the same thing as PCI as far as Windows 98 cares. So you can install PCI Express devices in Windows 98 if you have proper drivers. Most common PCI Express devices that are compatible with Windows 98 are video cards from NVIDIA and ATI. Like this ATI X700 PCI Express GPU, which is perfectly compatible with Windows 98 even when installed on a modern Intel Coffee Lake refresh platform. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.